Hi, everyone. This is Jen Paul from Digital Consultants, and we are ready for our next podcast today. And we have an exciting guest. And the topic that we're going to talk about is thinking about curriculum and standards. I know in the schools today, curriculum and standards are good topics to kind of consider. Are we keeping up with the standards? What is the best curriculum for my school based on my people in our group? So I want you to invite you today to our wonderful friend Janet Hale, who is from who has over 30 years of experience with schools, districts, and higher education programs, nonprofit, and businesses. She has helped them create effective and impactful curriculum, instructions, and assessments. She is an expert in standards and literacy and curriculum mapping and curriculum design, using various of models and frameworks to build educational environments where students can strive. With a master's in educational leadership and curriculum development and hands on experience in teaching in elementary, secondary, and special education classroom, Janet brings a wealth of knowledge that helps educators and leaders like yourself make choices that truly enhance teaching and learning. Janet is passionate about supporting educators in making curriculums decisions that not only meet standards but also enrich the students' experience. In today's session, we will be diving into often overlooked topic, making sure teachers and administrators fully understand the standards of their curriculum, whether purchased or developed in house and is built. So I am excited today to bring in Janet Hale into our podcast, and we're going to talk about amazing topics that's going to bless your school today. Hi, Janet. Welcome.
Oh, nice to see you, Jen.
Nice to
Thanks
see
for having
you.
me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm ready
Awesome.
to talk about all things curriculum and standards. One of my favorite subjects.
Hey. Well, thank you for your service to this educational world and for the amazing things that you are doing with them. And you have over 30 years of experience in talking about how standards and curriculums are. So
Mhm.
we're really excited to learn from you today.
Thank you. Well, and honestly, it's been more than 30 years. I know I don't look it, but because really, I started teaching before there were standards. So it's been an
Right.
interesting journey for me as far as from first an educational side being the teacher, and then of course all these years looking at it from more the curriculum design side as helping with administrators and teachers alike. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, exactly. So we're excited. So we're going to talk today about the first topic that I want to come bring up is that does our teachers truly understand the standards that underline the purchased or in-house curriculum they're doing? What do they really understand? Are they following it? What does that mean to them? So tell us a little bit about you. What do you think, and from your experience and what you've been doing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and so I find, interestingly enough, nowadays I'm finding a lot of places are leaning more toward a purchased curriculum, mainly because we had sort of again, we all lived through it, the COVID time, and so a lot of your seasoned teachers said, "I'm done, like over and out.
Mhm.
I'm going to retire." And so we have a very large population of younger teachers. And so two things are happening. They're not really having a mentorship because the teachers that would have that knowledge have retired, as well as they just don't have a whole lot of experience. So a lot of places and schools and districts are choosing to purchase a curriculum. And so while that's great, nothing wrong with that,
Right.
those curriculums, purchased or otherwise, have to stand on standards. That's the floorboards. I kind of use a three-legged stool analogy where I say, when you think about a three-legged stool, you have the design of the curriculum, you have the instruction of the curriculum, and you have the assessment of the curriculum. So it's a three-legged stool. But that stool has to sit, if you will, on floorboards. And the floorboards are the standards. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter to you what standards you're using. You can use your state standards. You can be
Right.
using international aero standards. You could be using Common Core, which is a little bit more of a national set of standards. It doesn't matter to me what standards, but that sort of becomes your sort of foundation, if you will, to what the learning is. So what's interesting is with a purchased curriculum,
Mhm.
uh, somebody has already decided and interpreted what those standards mean, because
Mhm.
we sort of say they're the floorboards or not the ceiling.
Right.
So what does that look like at a base? But also when you think about the leg of the stool, that's the curriculum design side, we also want to bring in what do we value as a school. So as you know, with lots of school environments, they have a mission statement, a vision statement. So what do we value for our students? And sometimes those don't necessarily intersect with uh, a, a purchase curriculum because they're doing it for a broader audience. So I
Right.
find it very important that the teachers really understand what I call standards literacy.
Okay.
They really are literate on how to read standards. What are the standards saying? What is happening in a standard that's letting you know this is what we suggest in the standard versus
Okay.
here's what we require in a standard.
Okay.
And I've been doing this kind of work now for almost 20 years, 20 years specifically. And honestly, this is not hyperbole. I have not had one district or school that I've gone to where when I do the presentation on standards literacy, that they say, "Oh, I knew that." They're like, "Oh my gosh, like
Right.
I
Right.
knew this before." And so I think I just find it really, to me, in the long run, it's helping the students because the teachers really understand their foundation, their floorboards on whether they decide to create their own in-house curriculum or they're getting a purchased one.
Okay. Awesome. And when they are understanding their purchase one or in house, is there like like a process or a step by step you do, or you kind of like, how, what can you just give us a little bit high level and generally
Yeah,
what teachers should
yeah.
do when they do that?
So, what I do with standards literacy is I actually start with, first of all, do you even know how to read a standard? So, there's kind of a famous
Good.
saying in
Right.
school that from pre-K to second grade, we learn to read, and then
Right.
third grade and on, we read to learn. So
Mm-hmm.
what I find is a lot of time in the educational realm, teachers and administrators kind of start in third grade. In other words, they're reading the standards as if they're figuring out what they need to learn from for their students. What I find is they're missing that kind of pre-K to second grade kind of, if you will, and I'm just using those terms loosely, but this whole idea of they are learning to read. So what I find that very big missing piece for teachers and for administrators is they don't know how to literally read the standard to understand how to interpret the standard. Because a lot of the standards, there's a lot of interpretation going on. And again, teachers, if they don't have that background, they're not sure what to do with that. And then the second piece that I do is once we really know how to read the standards well, I do a process called prioritizing the standards, where they also, we know in research that we have too many standards. So I'll do a little quiz on you. Audience can be doing it well. So there
Mhm.
was a study done, and they looked at a myriad of standards and looked at this idea of kindergarten, not pre-K, but kindergarten through grade 12, so
Right.
13 years of learning. If we took all the standards that a student has to learn in all their subject areas that are required to graduate, um,
Right.
how many years would they actually have to be in school to really master those standards well? So we know we've got 13, right?
Right. Right.
Well, it's more than that. So what do you think this study ended up showing? It was actually by Marzano and a few others, but what do you
Wow. Like 20
think? Higher?
higher. Wow. And like 40.
No, not quite that high.
Okay.
So the research showed 23 years. So
20
here's the
years. Wow.
point:
Right.
10 years have to be left out.
Wow.
So when you hear teachers say like, "I don't have enough time,"
Yeah.
they're actually
Why?
accurate,
No, they're
right?
pretty accurate. Yeah.
So here's the point: every teacher, if you really ask a teacher to say from the truth, do you leave things out? What's their answer going to be?
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is if we're all leaving that up to an individual teacher, we can
Right.
sort of end up having a Swiss cheese education for the child. When
Right.
we do
Right.
what I do through this prioritizing the standards, we really make systemic decisions about what are we valuing and prioritizing. What's really critical learning for our students based on the standards. I have different lenses they look through. So,
Mhm.
in like this idea of endurance, meaning even outside of school life, readiness within school from one to another,
Right.
and also this idea of leverage, meaning when I learn this in English language arts, that's going to help me in social studies, or when I learn this in math, it's going to
Right.
help me in science. So I use all these factors. It isn't just sort of willy nilly. I like
Right.
this standard or I don't. So that really has helped. Matter of fact, I just had a Zoom conference call with a school district in Oklahoma where they prioritize it's a pre-K through 12 school, they prioritized their math last year through this process that I use.
Right.
And they developed all their assessments around it. And they said they already can see this huge gain in their students because they really know what's kind of going on and where they're actually going with this and
Right.
what they actually value. And so to me, that's the most exciting thing because really, it really is about helping the students.
That's beautiful. And then after they go through the assessment, just for my curiosity, I would like to know how, we define, okay, for our school, this is the standard, this is the curriculum we want to develop. How often do you recommend schools to reassess that?
Reassess what the
The
standards or
standards of the curriculum, because culture change, people change, right?
I'm someone who doesn't believe in a 7-year cycle because a
Okay.
whole lot happens in 7 years. We do ongoing. So we do it from a living, breathing, and we look at it
Oh,
every year.
wow. Okay.
Yep, every year.
Every
It's
year.
just part of who we are. Because think about it, if we're doing assessments and really deciding what our students are doing well in and what they're
Right.
not, we can't wait for 7 years, right?
That's true. Yeah.
So the first thing is to really look at the standards. So actually, could you by any chance pull up the first little slide that I
Yeah.
like to show everybody? One of the things that I do is a process where I look to see how systemic standards are actually created. So these are the Common Core standards. I use that because they're a base of a lot of standards, international as well as in the US. And so what you'll notice at the very top is I mentioned that I use a coding system where I have made the standard bold-faced if it's brand new for that grade level, and it's italics if what's been said has been asked in previous years. Because the biggest problem is teachers have a tendency to be in silos. Like I teach fourth grade, so all I see is fourth grade. Maybe I'll talk a little bit to third grade, maybe a little bit to fifth grade, but I teach fourth grade. So if you don't look at the whole sort of spectrum of what's asked across the grade levels, you could be missing some very important things. So I'll give you an example. This is a key ideas and details with reading literature. And you'll notice, of course, in kindergarten, it's all bold because that's where these standards start. But if you look actually up into, especially third and fourth grade, third grade is where we're saying, okay, kiddo, you are getting really good at being able to refer explicitly to a text to give an answer in a reading literature environment. But notice that in fourth grade, this is the first time they're really asked to infer. I can tell you many in-house curriculums that the teachers create, this works great because this is really where they start asking the students to cognitively focus on inferring. But I've seen many purchased curriculum where they ask the students to infer back in first grade even and second grade, yet the standard doesn't actually ask for that. So my point is we really want to see what is it saying from a standard point of view and then looking at that through the lens of then what is our curriculum asking? Is this something that is appropriate? Is it obviously for some reason, and we know why based on research, they are asking for inference at a fourth grade level. So I think it's really important that they see that.
Right.
So that's something I think is a real important conversation starter. The other one is if you show the third slide that I sent you, arrow standards are very popular for international schools and Christian schools, and the arrow standards. Like this is just an example, and it's not just in arrow standards. I see them all over the place. Is they have standards sometimes that are across grade levels. So, for example, this has to do with students' SEL and kind of the social emotional piece. And you'll notice it has lower primary. So it's saying, hey, these are the standards, or in this case, standards and benchmarks from early childhood all the way to second grade. They don't change. So who really owns them? Who really is going to be expected to do what within these standards and benchmarks? Because otherwise, every grade level in their silo thinks they have to do them all. And that's not the case. This is saying by the time they reach second grade or by the time they reach fifth grade, this is what's happening and they own it well. So we need to have some conversations across our grade levels and even say what grade levels is going to be doing what. And what I find is by doing that, the teachers almost, you can kind of feel them like all of a sudden, I'm not responsible for everything. And I know systemically, really, who is responsible for what. Then I can do my focus at my grade level for my students extra, extra well. So I think that's a really important piece too.
That is awesome. And I thank you so much for laying it out, even like what are the, from each course or each grade level, what can we expect. And I definitely think that would take anxiety and overwhelming out of the teachers, because it could be like that alone is like, okay, you know what, this is a mountain, I don't even know if I can climb and if I want to start, right? But at least here is more chewable and say, hey, you know what are we going to, how are we going to achieve it? Are you able to share a story or some experience that, that you took a school through this process, and what kind of results the school experience or the teachers experience?
Oh gosh, I have plenty, since
I don't know,
I do this all the time and love doing it.
Mhm.
So, like a really good example was, I was with a school district where they had multiple elementary schools. There was like actually a larger district. There was like 6 or 7
Right.
of them, and then moved into 2 middle schools and then into 1 high school. So now
Okay.
I know a lot of your schools that you represent. It's one school. There's maybe 1 or 2 per grade level. It doesn't matter. It's the same kind of idea what happens.
Okay.
So when we were really prioritizing standards, and I'm going to show you something about that a little bit more in a moment,
Right.
is all of a sudden vocabulary became an important question, because as you know, vocabulary is very critical to learning. So
Right.
it was really interesting. What I did is, we had a sort of a task force, because again, it was a larger district, but again, I would do this with the whole staff and faculty in a smaller school district. But we got together to really talk about, in this case, mathematics and the kind of language that we're using.
Mhm.
We had prioritized those standards. It was so interesting. The high school teachers, talking to the elementary teacher, said, would you please, please, please have the students learn what a circle is properly? And all the elementary teachers were like, what do you mean? Like, and they said, we teach circle. And the gentleman who was talking drew a circle on the whiteboard, and then said, here's the problem. When they come up to our grade level, we say, put a point on the circle. And the students will put a point basically in the middle of the circle. The point needs to be on the arc. They said, so our students are coming up with a misunderstanding of vocabulary.
Mm.
Really, every single jaw dropped in the elementary grade. They're like, we didn't know that.
Yeah.
So it was just, and that just kept going. They kept going with like, what does this word mean? What does that word mean? And so, like, another example, I've even seen this in purchase curriculum, a bar graph. They actually don't represent the bar graph correctly in the primary grades. They make it look like sort of a convoluted histogram. And
Right.
so it was just tremendous. And so what that caused them to do is really go back and look at their in-house curriculum, and even things they bought teacher pay teachers, to see,
Mm.
is it accurate and does it meet with
Right.
vocabulary. And that was a huge change for the school. So it's those kinds of
That's
conversations.
awesome. Yeah.
Again, I'm very much in the mindset that we have to look at things systemically. If we look at only things from just one grade level, we
Right.
miss a lot.
That's
So let me just show you something else that I think really adds to that piece of like little storytelling. So when I do the prioritizing the standards, a very important piece is, once they understand how to read a standard, I have them actually look at the standards broken apart. Because what we find quite often in education is, they'll say, oh, let's prioritize the standards. This standard is super important, but the
right.
standard is like as long as a paragraph. So I break them apart for them. So
Nice.
if we would, just if you could pull up the next slide, because it shows you what I mean by sort of this idea of broken apart, and it's pretty shocking for teachers. And that is like, here's fourth grade Common Core SEEK standards, which again are base of so many other standards and Arrow standards and others, that they use them as a base. But notice, very importantly, I tell you there that there's originally 86 standards. So if I am a fourth grade teacher, I'm responsible for my students learning 86 standards. With that said, if you break apart the standards into the actual sort of standard statements within this standard, there's 337. So the example here shows you that the RL41, that's the actual standard in yellow. And you'll notice that I've even got italics and bold, so you know what's new at this year. But you'll notice at the very top, it says, hey, there's 337 standards at fourth grade. If you're going to use my prioritizing process, and again, there's a lot that goes with that, but there's critical need to know and still need to know standards. We take 50% of the broken apart standards. So we're saying 171 of these standards we're saying at fourth grade are going to be critical learning. And that's decided by the fourth grade teachers and also approved by the fifth and sixth grade teachers, because we can't just sort of willy-nilly say we think it's important, because it might have a different value for those that are in the grade levels above us or even below us. But then what we do is we go through a process. We use checks, pluses, and dashes to indicate how this is done. First, they do it individually. An individual teacher does it. Then they get together with their team of teachers and they have to come to consensus. But what I just want you to notice is that really when we think we can, yep, we got these standards figured out, this is why it takes 23 years, because there's too many. So this is fourth grade. When they get to upper grades, it's even higher. So what we do when we do this process is the exciting thing for me, Jen, is seeing the teachers talking to each other and going, oh my gosh, like look at,
Right.
and I can tell you another thing that's happened in more than twice, because I can think of two that just have happened in the last few years, where when we did this, the teachers have been teaching there for quite a while, but now they're looking purely at the standards. They actually went to the director of curriculum or to the head of school and said, we have to be honest with you. We don't know what these really mean.
Wow.
Yet they're teaching it, right? Because they're basing it on that in-house, not an in-house curriculum, but a purchase curriculum, and they really don't know. So I even had a very large school district that said, can we just stop for a moment and let's do some training of what these words mean, and then we'll go back. So theme versus topic in ELA. It's even what some of the things mean in mathematics. So, but again, I've done this also with small Christian schools, and it's one teacher per grade level. And so what we usually do in that situation is I'll have, let's say, first, second, and third, or pre-K, first, second, they work together as a team on doing pre-K. Then they do kindergarten, then they do first. So it works regardless of the size of the school, but it's just, to me, it's just the enlightenment, if you will, of what these standards are really asking. Then another story is I've had many of them that then when they value those checks to say these are our critical standards for our kiddos, they go look at the purchase curriculum and they do a crosswalk and they find that the purchase curriculum does not value what they value.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's very, very interesting.
It is. I'll be fully transparent. I think when I look at standards, it almost reminds me of a big contract that I have to look at and read, and it's overwhelming. But it's, you know what? I think you actually bring fun into the whole picture of it, and and do it with intention of seeing results and purposefully showing that, what, how can we take this overwhelming thing and say, hey, what, let's do it where it actually makes a difference in the student's life, right? And then that's what it was there for.
Yeah, and I can tell you more, and I actually love this stuff. It's my passion. But it's so funny. I'll go and do workshops, with teachers in person or with Zoom, and they're like, I was dreading this. Like, then at the end, they're like, oh my gosh, like this has helped me so much, just individually, and then also because it really, to me, it empowers the teachers. It's kind of like I always say, I don't want the curriculum to own the teachers. I want the teachers to own the curriculum. And the only way they can do that is know what those standards are, because that's what it's based on. So that's really critical to me. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that was very informative, and I think it was really a great blessing on us. So, how can we get hold of you? So, I want to just share your information, and then maybe you can tell us, what are some of the ways we can connect with you?
Okay, so I have a website, curriculumdecisions.com, and there's lots of information. Curriculum standards would be the section to really check out for what I'm talking about now, and with prioritizing standards, etc. Also, because I do deal with curriculum a lot, I do curriculum mapping. I've written books about that. Popular now, too, is something called curriculum storyboards. So I also do those. And then I also do curriculum editing. So I actually help companies and places develop, especially on the instructional side, materials that are aligned to standards properly. So that's kind of what I do, and you'll find that a lot of that at the website. Also, I have information. You can get a hold of me through my website as well. But I also gave you my email address. I live in Tucson, Arizona, so Teach Tucson, and my phone number in the States. So yeah, lots of ways to get a hold of me. Love to hear from people.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we will definitely have it in the comment as well, so people can connect with you guys on that and check your website and even email you if they want to reach out to you. But we'll love to have you back, because I know this, we just did the surface of it. I know there's a wealth and wealth of information that's inside of you that we'll love to kind of get more insight. And even if people want to get more, they will connect with you. But we'll love to have you back, Janet, and
Oh, thank you.
give us more insight on all of these fun curriculum and standard approaches and how to
People
take
might not think
them.
they're fun, but I do, and I make
You kind of hear it, but you know what, I have to admit, this was the you even opened up to the understanding of, you know what, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It could, you know what, if you take the right approach, I think, and how you walking them through that, I
yes.
think it definitely is eye opener, and I think it will be a more purposeful school when you put that into place. So
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
thank you again for coming, and we will connect again, and we will stay in touch, and we are praying that it goes well for you and the curriculum and the schools that you're connecting with. God
Thank
bless you. Thank you again.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. We trust that everything was a blessings for you today, and we will have many topics like this that will help you and your school just in excel and expand in a way that will be a blessing to your students. So stay tuned for our many other podcasts. Subscribe to our channels, and we'll look forward to connecting with you. God bless you.